You sit there in the dimly lit church hall after the service has ended, the echoes of the final hymn still hanging in the air, like a promise unfulfilled, while your hands clutch the worn edges of the pew and your mind races with the weight of years spent believing that this was the path to salvation. The only truth that mattered yet in this quiet moment, the questions flood in uninvited, making your chest tighten with a familiar unease, because deep down you have always sensed the cracks in the foundation. The way the stories handed down from childhood suddenly feel like intricate webs spun to keep you in place rather than lift you up. And as the last few parishioners file out chatting about potlucks and prayer meetings, you remain frozen, replaying the sermon about original sin and redemption through blood sacrifice, wondering how a loving Creator could design a system where failure is baked into humanity from the start, requiring eternal gratitude for a fix that demands total submission. And in that instant, the psychological grip tightens as you recall the fear that kept you compliant, the childhood nights terrified of hellfire for doubting the miracles, the resurrection, the virgin birth, all elements that, when examined in the cold light of adult reason, begin to resemble ancient narrative devices used across cultures to explain the unknown and control the masses. Yet here you are, still tethered by the emotional bonds of community and the comfort of ritual that have shaped your identity for so long, creating a cognitive dissonance that gnaws at the edges of your sanity, because to question this is to risk losing everything. The relationships, the sense of purpose, the hope of an afterlife that has motivated generations through suffering, and as the realization builds, you feel the intensity of the internal conflict rising like a tide, threatening to drown the certainties you once held dear, pushing you to confront the uncomfortable truth that perhaps this entire framework was born not from divine revelation, but from human ingenuity in an era of limited knowledge, where stories of gods walking among men and rising from the dead served to unify tribes and justify power structures that evolved into empires of faith spanning continents and centuries. The journey deepens as you step out into the daylight, the sun harsh against your eyes, mirroring the harshness of the thoughts now demanding attention, memories surging forward of family gatherings where grace was said before meals and doubts were gently but firmly discouraged, with reminders of faith as a virtue stronger than evidence. And you remember the psychological mechanisms at play, the way repeated affirmations and communal reinforcement create neural pathways that make questioning feel like betrayal, not just of doctrine, but of loved ones who sacrificed for this belief system, instilling a deep-seated fear of abandonment, both earthly and eternal, that keeps millions anchored even when personal experiences contradict the promised peace, the prosperity, the protection, and as you walk further, the reflections expand into the historical layers. The way early followers transformed a crucified preacher into a cosmic savior figure, blending Jewish messianic expectations with Greco-Roman mystery cults and pagan resurrection myths to create a compelling narrative that spread like wildfire through the Roman Empire, offering hope to the oppressed while simultaneously providing a tool for emperors like Constantine to consolidate power under one banner, turning a message of love and turning the other cheek into a state religion that fueled crusades, inquisitions, and colonial expansions, all while promising salvation to the faithful and damnation to the rest, creating a dualistic worldview that has justified both profound acts of charity and unimaginable atrocities throughout history. Yet the exploration remains rooted in empathy for the human condition, the innate desire for meaning in a chaotic universe where death looms large and suffering is inevitable, making such grand narratives psychologically irresistible, even if they rest on foundations of unverifiable claims that demand faith over empirical scrutiny, and you feel the emotional progression intensify as personal anecdotes blend with broader patterns, recalling how the tithing practices the emphasis on obedience. The hierarchical structures within churches mirror mechanisms seen in other long-standing institutions designed to extract resources and loyalty while delivering intangible rewards like community belonging and moral certainty that soothe existential anxieties but at the cost of critical inquiry. And as the narrative unfolds internally, you grapple with the contradictions, the Bible's multiple authors over centuries, with varying agendas and textual variants, the selective interpretation of scriptures to fit contemporary needs, the prosperity gospel preachers amassing wealth while preaching poverty as virtue, the scandals that rock institutions from sexual abuse cover-ups to financial improprieties, all of which, when viewed through a lens of human psychology, reveal patterns of power corruption and self-preservation rather than infallible divine guidance, yet acknowledging the complexity. The way these same structures have inspired art, music, literature, and ethical frameworks that advanced human cooperation and compassion, forcing a nuanced reflection on whether the benefits outweigh the costs, or if the system itself perpetuates dependency on unprovable premises that hinder full human flourishing in an age of scientific understanding. The intensity builds further as the psychological journey accelerates into deeper territories of doubt and realization, where you envision the countless individuals across time who poured their lives into this faith system, enduring hardships in the name of a promised kingdom that never materialized on earth. The martyrs, the missionaries, the everyday believers who found solace in prayer during plagues, wars, and personal tragedies, their stories, evoking both admiration for human resilience and sorrow for the potential misdirection of that energy toward appeasing an unseen deity rather than addressing tangible problems like inequality, disease, and ignorance. And in this moment of heightened emotional tension, the reflections turn inward, examining your own life, the times when faith provided a buffer against despair, the moments of perceived answered prayers that in retrospect align with coincidence, statistical probability, or the power of positive mindset rather than supernatural intervention, creating layers of uncomfortable truths about confirmation bias and the human tendency to attribute meaning to randomness, all while the broader historical arc reveals how the religion adapted and survived schisms, reformations, and scientific revolutions by reinterpreting doctrines to accommodate new realities, from heliocentrism to evolution, yet maintaining core elements that prioritize belief over evidence, fostering a mindset that can at times discourage questioning in favor of trust in authority figures who claim special insight into the divine will. And as the progression reaches its peak, the internal monologue surges with existential weight, contemplating the scale of influence this narrative has exerted, shaping laws, cultures, and individual psyches for 2 millennia, often with genuine intent to guide morality, but also embedding fears of eternal torment that manipulate behavior from childhood onward, instilling guilt over natural human impulses and desires that, when suppressed or redirected, contribute to psychological strain seen in various forms of religious trauma. And you wrestle with the philosophical questions of free will, predestination, the problem of evil, where a benevolent, omnipotent God allows immense suffering, raising doubts that theologians have debated for centuries without resolution, leading to the realization that these tensions may stem from the inherent limitations of anthropomorphic projections onto the universe rather than literal truths, and the exploration continues, weaving through personal stories of lost faith, regained faith, and the liminal spaces in between where individuals navigate the loss of certainty with courage, seeking new sources of meaning in humanism, science, art, and relationships that affirm dignity without requiring supernatural validation. The momentum carries you deeper into the labyrinth of human motivation, where the appeal of such a comprehensive worldview lies in its ability to address fundamental fears, the terror of oblivion, the need for justice in an unfair world, the longing for connection to something greater than oneself, mechanisms that clever storytellers and leaders throughout history have harnessed, whether intentionally or through cultural evolution, to build enduring movements. And in your mind's eye, scenes unfold of ancient gatherings in catacombs, where hope mingled with desperation, birthing legends that grew into dogmas enforced by social pressure and institutional might, the translation errors, the apocryphal texts excluded for not fitting the emerging orthodoxy, the political maneuvers at councils like Nicaea that standardized beliefs, all contributing to a constructed edifice that has stood the test of time, not because of unassailable proof, but because of its profound resonance with the human psyche, its capacity to evolve while preserving the emotional core of redemption, sacrifice, and community. And as the reflections intensify, the uncomfortable truths surface about how this system can both liberate through forgiveness and oppress through judgment, creating internal conflicts for believers who experience genuine spiritual highs alongside nagging inconsistencies that they attribute to mystery or personal failing rather than systemic issues, prompting a compassionate acknowledgement of the vulnerability that makes people susceptible to grand narratives promising order amid chaos. Yet the journey presses on, examining the global impact the way missionary work spread education alongside doctrine in some regions, while eradicating indigenous beliefs in others, the role in civil rights movements, and opposition to them. The ongoing debates in modern society over science education, bioethics and pluralism, where the legacy continues to shape public discourse in ways that demand careful navigation between respecting personal faith and pursuing collective truth seeking grounded in evidence and reason, and pushing further the emotional crescendo approaches as you confront the scale of the human investment, trillions of hours in prayer, worship, study and service, the vast architectural wonders, cathedrals that stand as monuments to devotion, the artistic masterpieces inspired by biblical themes, all testaments to creativity, channeled through this lens, yet also reminders of opportunity costs where resources and intellect might have flowed differently in a world less dominated by one interpretive framework. And in this peak of intensity, the personal identification deepens with the audience, who may recognize their own quiet doubts during sermons or late-night contemplations. The way the fear of hell or loss of heaven keeps many from fully exploring alternatives. The psychological comfort of certainty traded for the unease of uncertainty, and as the narrative layers accumulate, the exploration reveals how such belief systems thrive on open loops of prophecy and fulfillment, partial explanations that invite deeper commitment while discouraging final closure. The end times predictions that have repeatedly failed, yet renewed with each generation, the moral absolutes that provide guidance but can rigidify into judgmentalism. And through it all, a thread of empathy persists, recognizing that for many, this faith represents the greatest source of hope and moral compass they have known, making any critique not an attack but an invitation to self-examination, to weigh the psychological benefits against the potential for disillusionment when the promises encounter the realities of a complex, indifferent universe, and the reflections culminate in a call to integrate the wisdom extracted from these traditions, the emphasis on love, compassion, and self-reflection, while releasing the elements that no longer serve in an era where knowledge expands exponentially, allowing humanity to craft meaning from within rather than from above, fostering a more mature engagement with existence that honors the past without being chained to it. The final waves of realization wash over with profound intensity as the script of your life and the collective human story intertwine, revealing how the power of this narrative lies in its storytelling mastery. The parables, the prophecies, the apocalyptic visions that captivate the imagination and provide frameworks for interpreting suffering and joy alike. Yet when scrutinized through lenses of psychology, anthropology, and history, they emerge as profoundly human creations reflecting the hopes, fears, and social dynamics of their times, amplified across generations by the universal need for belonging and transcendence. And in this climactic psychological space, you feel the release of long-held tensions, the acceptance of uncertainty as a strength rather than weakness, the appreciation for the ways in which such systems have sculpted civilization while envisioning paths forward that build upon their ethical insights without the scaffolding of unverifiable supernatural claims, encouraging a humanism that celebrates inquiry, empathy, and the shared journey of discovery in a vast cosmos where meaning is ours to create. And as the emotional arc reaches its zenith, the immersion leaves you transformed not with anger or rejection, but with a deeper understanding of the intricate dance between belief and reality, the beauty and the burden of faith. Traditions that have defined so much of human experience, inviting ongoing reflection and dialogue that honors the complexity without demanding blind allegiance. And in the quiet aftermath, the open loops linger, prompting continued exploration of self and society in pursuit of truths that resonate with evidence, reason, and the full spectrum of human potential.